Hi, in this video we're going to understand how procedural cities work in YAG. First of all, cities are just another kind of dungeon, and the general properties of dungeon, like changing the theme or the name, have already been explained in the dungeon panel video tutorial. So in this video we're going to focus on the new parameters brought by the cities. We can access them by clicking on this button here. So regular dungeon interface here, okay, and city interface here. Just one extra detail: surroundings, dungeon editing, and fog of war do not work with cities, so their interfaces have been disabled here, here, and also here. So do not worry if you find them grayed when working with city, it's perfectly normal. So let's start with a bit of vocabulary with this city on screen. First of all, the city is the large rectangles that contains everything, obviously. It contains roads and city blocks. Roads are those empty lines, and city blocks are the smaller rectangles that contains the buildings. Finally, the smallest unit in a city dungeon is the cell, which is the square used to build everything. Sorry, and is the unit we'll be using when talking about cities. For example, this city is exactly 15 by 25 cells large and contains blocks which are 4 to 7 cells large. Buildings are mostly 1 by 1 cells, but this type of dungeon authorizes larger structures to allow, for example, larger buildings, gardens, parkings, marketplaces, and so on. For example, in this city, most buildings are 1 by 1, but we have a 2 by 1 church, okay, and a 3 by 3 marketplace. So let's review the parameters very quickly. This one sets the fixed min and max dimension of the city, so exactly 15 by 25, and I should put an X here instead of an arrow. This will be fixed in the next release. This one sets the available min and max dimension of the blocks. Alright, so each block is between 4 and 7 cells large. This one is the probability of appearance of inner buildings in the blocks, and finally this one is the probability of road removal. So we'll now see what this means exactly, so you get a more practical idea of how they work with each other. So the city dimension holds no secret and is quite easy to understand. Those are the exact dimension of the city expressed in cells. The only thing we have to be careful with, as always, is not to put too large numbers at the beginning to limit the numbers of polygons we bring on the screen. Themes contains very different complexities and polygon counts, so for each theme, start small, like 10 or 15, and increase progressively and very carefully. Let's go on with the block dimension here. They are also expressed in cells, but this time it's random. This means that the city will try to create rectangle blocks where each side is comprised between 4 and 7. So we can have 4 by 4, 4 by 5, 4 by 6, etc. up to 7 by 7. Important note here is that the size of the block determines the amount of roads we get. With smaller blocks we get lots of roads, and with larger blocks obviously we get very few roads. Let's continue with the inner buildings probability. I haven't been quite complete when introducing the blocks. Blocks contain buildings on their boundaries and in their surface. This parameter here is the probability of appearance of inner buildings or larger structures only. To show you the difference, we're going to suppress the inner buildings by setting it to 0. And you can see that we don't get an empty town. The blocks still have their boundary buildings, which are all 1 by 1. Okay, but they contain nothing inside. So by setting it to 1, all the blocks will be packed with building as densely as possible. Decreasing it will progressively create more holes in the block until 0, where blocks are completely empty. Finally, the last parameter is the probability of road removal, and this is an absolutely essential one because it will give our city its personality, so to speak. And we're going to spend a bit more time on that one and its interaction with the block dimension. To show you all that, we're going to do a few things. First we will take a bit of altitude. Okay. Then we're going to set a large generic city, let's say 50 by 50. And we're going to empty the blocks. Okay. And I'm also going to set it to 0 so that you can see that by doing all that, we have a clear structure of our town, of our city here. Okay, and you can see that for the moment the city is not very interesting because it contains only a rectangular network of roads. So to make it more interesting, we're going to suppress a bit more roads. And this is going to be done with this parameter. But of course, this has to be done very carefully, because if I put 1 here, okay, then basically I get no roads. So just the city is a 1 block city. If I put 1 here, you can see that the city is just 1 big block. Not very interesting. Okay, and if I put 0 on the other hand, as you have seen, the city is not interesting because it's just rectangles over rectangles over rectangles. Okay, so the game here is to find a sweet spot where the city will be more varied, will contain more variety, but still be connected. Because if I put a large number, let's say 0,4, okay, if I suppress more roads, then I get very few roads left, and the city is not connected, meaning that you cannot go from one point to another. So let's try with 0,2. Okay, we get a little more road, but you can see that the city is still not connected. It's not possible to go from here to here using the roads. So maybe 0,1 will be a better place. Okay, much better here, because we have some variety. It's not just rectangles, and we still can get from any point to any other point using the roads only. Okay, so you get a feeling of what the game is here to create a nice and interesting city. Where it becomes quite subtle is that, of course, it's related. The number that you're going to put here is related to the size of your block. Because if, for example, I put very small blocks, okay, if I let all the roads, you can see that we've got lots of roads, obviously. So I can afford to suppress more of them, 0,4 here, and get an interesting structure. Okay, but if I put larger blocks, like 6 by 6, and still let the 0,4, then I've got much less road to suppress, and 0,4 will let me with very few roads. So I have to find a better sweet spot. Like, let's try 0,05. Okay, it's still a bit square, but a bit more interesting. 0,07 should do it. Okay, much interesting here. We have some nice structure. The city is still completely connected, and we've got some nice blocks of blocks, and so on. So you have to do this job, and when it's done, then you can put back the buildings inside the blocks, like by putting a 1 or any value that you want, and you will get an interesting city here with road. Okay, so now that you get what the rules of the game are, we can understand the preset that I have set here. So what I did here is to find for you the sweet spot for various sizes of blocks. So 1 by 1, okay, 0,6 is good, 3 by 3, 0,2 is good, 10 by 10, 0,04 is good. So the idea is that this can be a good starting point for your own city by giving you the order of magnitude that gives interesting city for that size of building. So if you want a more dense city, go for higher blocks, and then you can start from 0,04. If you want a more sparse city, then aim 2 by 2 and start with 0,3. Okay, and in all cases, as you can see, let's come back to 20 by 20, which are the default value. We get a bit of an interesting town. So 10 by 10 in a 20 by 20 will never be really interesting, but 3 by 3 here, we get a nice structure, and even 1 by 1 with a 0.6 here, we get a nice structure as well. Okay, so the job is done here and can be a very good starting point. I also prepared a spare city with irregular blocks from 2 to 3, okay, and it works well, and a denser city from 4 to 7 with a 0 on here. Okay, so really it's important to understand the connection between the size of the blocks and the probability of the number of roads that you are removing from your grid of roads. Okay, and finally the default value here give a very irregular block size, so from 1 to 1 to 10 by 10 with a generic probability. So generally this one will give an interesting structure, okay, and irregular and still quite connected. But if you want to be more precise according to your needs in your game, then those one can be very good starting point to your own experiments. Okay, I think this is it for this video. Thank you very much for watching it completely. I hope you found it useful and interesting, and if it's the case, then hopefully see you in the next with pleasure. Bye bye.